This podcast is intended for a mature audience over 19 years of age and is provided on an educational and informational basis. Any material presented is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as a substitute for professional medical advice or as an endorsement or medical claim by Everything Podcast or Ripco.pro.
Ross is looking good right now.
He's not holding back.
To go. He's fighting it right now for all it's worth. It's carve or starve for Ross right now.
He's in first place.
Ross Rebliati, Canada.
72 hours after Ross's gold medal run.
Ross Rebliati has tested positive for passive marijuana.
Forced to forfeit his gold medal.
Returned the medal and diploma awarded to the athlete Rebliati.
They'd put me in jail in Japan.
Overturned. He did get the medal back.
I just wanted to take the control back again. Let's turn this mess into a success. I'd love if we could be part of normalizing cannabis use and to also stand up for the people who use cannabis. It's personal.
I'm Ross Rebliati, and this is the Potcast.
Welcome to the Potcast with Ross Rebliati, where we explore the world of cannabis through the eyes of one of the world's premier cannabis advocates.
I've been at the forefront of cannabis awareness for over 25 years, since that fateful day in Nagano. Join me as we dig deep for gold nuggets hidden in the wide world of weed. It's growers, producers, innovators, and enthusiasts. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and keep the podcast in your rotation.
Cannabis might not be legal worldwide just yet, but that doesn't stop the world's weed enthusiasts from traveling far and wide to sample global cannabis delicacies. In this episode of the podcast, we're taking you on a tour from the pioneering cannabis tourist destinations to North America's first 420-friendly cafe, to the budding industry growing right here in beautiful British Columbia. After all, BC weed is world-renowned, and we've got passionate people who've been in the business since, well, long before legalization, who can tell you where it all began and where they plan to take it. It's like Kyp Rowe.
It was a vibe back in the day. Our seed office was 2 doors down from Blunt Brothers. I know Daryl, I know Karen Watson started the Amsterdam Cafe. There was a group of us down there, Mark Emery aside, that were driving the narrative down there, and it felt free at one point. I mean, Saturday nights at Blunt Brothers were a vibe, man. They had bands and you could buy beers upstairs, you could puff in there, and it was packed. There were all these Yanks coming up and buying seeds.
And we'll chat with Graham Meckling, who's busy creating memorable tour experiences for visitors to Vancouver Island, served with a side of cannabis.
I got a passenger transportation license and all the things you need to drive people around safely in my Jeep Grand Cherokee, and started taking people for drives in the summer. Just put a website up and said, hey, come do some sightseeing tours and get stoned.
So awesome.
I mean, that's what I would love to do.
I'm Don Schaefer.
And I'm Ross Rebliati, and this is the Potcast.
And now for the pot news. A 2021 study at the University of Guelph concluded that Canada has the potential to become the Napa Valley of cannabis tourism. The research showed that pairing cannabis with tourism helps normalize cannabis use, unlock new tourism revenue streams, and it could convince decision makers to embrace Canada's reputation for cannabis, much like California's reputation for wine. The researchers arrived at their findings by creating a database of all Canadian cannabis tourism businesses. Through qualitative review of the first 2 years of cannabis legalization in Canada, they discovered significant growth in public acceptance of cannabis use if it's presented to tourists as legally separate from other illicit drugs. South of the Canadian border, travelers who'd like to book a room that might come with a complimentary joint instead of a chocolate on their pillow can do so on a website called Bud and Breakfast. The site, which functions similarly to Airbnb, features 2,000 active listings of cannabis-friendly lodging in cities like Chicago and New York. Bud and Breakfast hosts offer places to stay that permit cannabis use and may even provide information about local cannabis shops and other weed-focused experiences to help cannabis tourists make the most of their plant-powered vacation. Cannabis tourism has existed long before legalization, and it's still a thing, even in countries where weed hasn't been legalized. Whether local authorities choose to enforce those laws is another story. Take, for example, Cambodia, where cannabis is illegal, but tourists can buy a slice of happy pizza from food vendors and tourist spots. Each slice, of course, is infused with enough THC to, well, make you happy. Allegedly. Cannabis tourists traveled to Morocco to sample its world-renowned hash. As the world's largest cannabis resin producer, it's no wonder it's an international destination for hash enthusiasts. But even though it's widely used, it's still considered an illegal substance. And on the legal cannabis tourism front, we have the U.S. While Colorado and Washington were trailblazers in legalization and cannabis tourism in the country, weed is now legal in 24 states, with Forbes magazine valuing the U.S. cannabis tourism industry at a whopping $17 billion. South Africa's cannabis tourism has been booming since the legalization of weed in private spaces in 2018. Thailand decriminalized cannabis in 2022, prompting an estimated 12,000 dispensaries to pop up. However, Thailand's new government is making moves to restrict cannabis use in the country once again. And how could we forget the Netherlands, one of the most famous destinations and perhaps what one might consider the ground zero of cannabis tourism. Although cannabis is not legal federally, Amsterdam's regulated consumption lounges, called coffee shops, have been in operation since the 70s.
Of course, we would have to cancel the podcast altogether if we didn't shout out Canada's own Amsterdam Cafe, the legendary self-proclaimed respectable joint in operation on Hastings Street in downtown Vancouver since 1998. Well before weed was legal in Vancouver, folks were traveling from all over the world to pull up a seat at North America's first 420-friendly cafe, where you could roll up your joints and smoke them in the designated smoking room, and then maybe pick up some house-made munchies and non-alcoholic drinks to enjoy after. In fact, our first guest on the podcast today was around during those glory days of the Amsterdam Cafe.
If you're a cannabis enthusiast, you know BC Bud is famous around the world. People have been hearing the legend for decades, even traveling long distances to see what the fuss is all about. One person has been there since the beginning, keeping the torch lit for BC Bud lovers.
My name is Kyp Rowe. I am the VP of Brand Development and Sales at the Victoria Cannabis Company, located in Vic West on Vancouver Island. I've been in this 30 years. I started out hustling packs to Americans back in the day in Vancouver, like everybody else did in my age group, if you were in cannabis. I owned a store in Kitsilano for 4 years called High End. Then I owned a seed company called Legend Seeds from 1999 to 2007 that sold internationally. And so we sold Dutch seeds, Canadian breeders and whatnot. So I've been in this my entire adult life.
Kyp is from what some folks in the industry might call the legacy market, but you'll never hear him use that term.
When legalization came and they started coining the term legacy, it just used to drive me batshit, because I was so sick of some corporate hack coming up with a name that defined an entire generation's worth of industry people. They were taking it. And to me, it just made more sense. It was traditional market cannabis. That's what British Columbia cannabis was. There was no Ontario cannabis scene back in the early 90s. It was all BC.
All BC Bud.
Absolutely. It was East Hastings. It was Blood Brothers. It was Amsterdam Cafe. It was Hemp BC. It was, that to me was the traditional market back in the day. And so I wanted to bring that to the forefront, where we are talking about traditional flavor profiles, traditional cannabis that was bred in British Columbia, the traditional vibe of separating smalls and apicals, like just those packs that all the Yanks would see back in the day when they'd make it down to the ATL or down to Miami from BC, that gave the name BC Bud a good name, and not just all the swag that was grown in East Band basements.
It's not just a branding play.
No, it wasn't, because it meant something to people. It truly did. And I wanted to bring that culture back.
Kyp was there when Vancouver started making a name for itself as a cannabis tourism destination.
It was a vibe back in the day. Our seed office was 2 doors down from Blunt Brothers. I know Daryl, I know Karen Watson started the Amsterdam Cafe. There was a group of us down there, Mark Emery aside, that were driving the narrative down there. And it was a total scene, man. It made that block safe, to be quite honest. It's a lot safer than it is now, that's for sure. And it really promoted the culture and the scene that was going on here at the time.
Yeah, it seemed like a pretty interesting vibe back then. Like in the 90s, I was out of the country quite a bit, just doing my racing and stuff in Europe. But coming back home and having that culture ready for me to get back into it, every time I got home, it's a special feeling.
Felt like home, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's what you equated to BC, being in BC. That felt like home. I know, I absolutely loved it. It was a great time, and it's just incredibly thankful to be a part of it.
Well, I had the same kind of trajectory as you did. We had a store in Kelowna, the Ross Gold store, and that was pre-legalization. And I don't want to steal the spotlight here, but for me, it was all about putting my neck on the line and fighting for legalization like everybody else, and not just jumping on to a bandwagon that was already predetermined after legalization. So I get where you guys came from, and I can appreciate it too.
You pushed the needle. Everyone in that scene, that kind of like 2006 to 2014 scene, pushed it. They made the government change the laws. They absolutely did. And I love everyone for it that was involved in that time period, Ross. That's why we're here today.
Yeah, it was quite a magical time. It was almost like the 60s, all over again, where we were like pushing the realms of the law, but doing what we thought was right and coming through at the end of the day. It was good to be part of.
Oh, dude, absolutely. That's why we're here today, right, Ross?
A lot's changed since those early days. With cannabis legalized in Canada, the farmgate store is permitted. The legal cannabis tourism industry is taking off. Now locals and tourists alike can come and purchase BC bud right where it's grown, much like picking up a pint of cherries at a roadside farm stand. And if you really want the traditional BC cannabis experience, visiting Kyp and his team at Victoria Cannabis Company should definitely be on your itinerary. They're pioneering the scene in BC as the second farmgate store to open in the province and the first on Vancouver Island.
I've been on with the team here for about 2.5 years. They didn't have their own brand yet. There were, I think, 5 employees in the entire building when I arrived. I think the last count were up to 36. So it's been quite an adventure. I took this company in and created the brand, the Victoria Cannabis Company, and we've been slowly going on it ever since. We added a standard processor to the building as well. We also have farmgate, obviously, too. So we've got 5 licenses under one building.
That's excellent. That's the only way to go.
The end game was to make that farmgate store, and we're 14 weeks in now.
Wow.
It's seeing its fruition.
Nice work, Kyp.
I used to have hair. I appreciate that, Ross. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, no, it's no small feat.
Yeah, it's been an absolute journey. I mean, the team is a killer team here at VCC. With Farmgate, we can finally live the dream of seeds strictly to sale, and we're in a great spot here, and we're really excited. And seeing the community out here in Victoria has been so supportive of us. It really feels community in a space that, we're trying to educate the public as much as possible as well too. It's been a wild ride. I'm just loving every minute of it. Also draws about 20 Karens that hate it. But I can't tell you how many letters and emails we get all the time from people that aren't really too happy about us being here.
They're going to have to live with it.
That's right, Ross.
I was in Victoria like a year and a bit ago at an event at a coffee shop, and there was a major turnout for that. It was a happening place that night. I can only imagine on a daily what it's like out there. I got to get back to the island.
The scene is pretty ripe here. You can't get any more left coast than Victoria, to be honest.
Yeah, right.
The epicenter of people taking cannabis very bloody seriously. So big things ahead. Looking forward to our first summer with the store open. That's going to be huge.
I'm going to have to come out for that one.
Absolutely. Please do. We'd love to have that. I'll show you around the facility as well. We are going to be doing some tours. We don't have a lot of space in this facility. We don't have a window in the store that goes onto a flower room or anything like that. But what we do have in the store is we've got a video that loops that shows all the different aspects of the building and what we do here in the grow rooms, the nursery, the processing, and all of our bud tenders. Some of them have actually worked before the store was open in the facility, and they know exactly what's going on. They can tell you every step of every process.
That seems like really organic and a nice way to introduce people who may not know so much about the cannabis industry and its roots.
Agreed, 100% agreed. I mean, listen, we've had some naysayers in the neighborhood. I walked 3 Karens essentially through the entire facility before we opened up because they tried to stop this store.
I wish I was there for that one.
Oh, it was painful. But, education's huge for us. We're trying to change hearts and minds. And it's really important for us to be looked at like any other business in the community.
And it's a community based in like wellness, right? And for people to not really understand that, that's a little bit of a uphill battle for the cannabis business. But in reality, it's all about feeling better and doing better and being the best you can be. And that's the message that we're all trying to promote, or most of us anyway.
Forget the Karens. Let's get back to what we all came for, that legendary BC bud. What kind of local delicacies can cannabis enthusiasts expect to find at VCC's Farmgate store?
Well, first off, we don't just sell our product. We only do about 1,200 kilograms a year. It's a drop in the bucket. So we wanted to focus on British Columbia cannabis. That was a big sticking point for me when we opened the store. I didn't want to carry big Pupco weed. I didn't want to carry a lot of stuff that was outside of our province because I want to showcase all of my friends, my homies that have dedicated their lives to this plant and to this industry, and I wanted to help support them as much as possible. That said, there are certain SKUs that we need to carry to fulfill what our customers are looking for. Mostly edibles and drinks. There's not a lot of companies in BC that actually do that, to be quite frank. So we have had to make some allowances for sure. So they can expect like a snapshot of British Columbia cannabis growers when they come into our store, as well as SKUs from BCC that aren't readily available in other stores in the province or in Canada. We do have some stuff that's just available at our Farmgate store.
And for visitors who want to get really nerdy about their BC weed, Kyp's the guy to talk to.
So to me, breeders are the real authors of our cannabis experiences. And they kind of got lost in the shuffle with legalization, to be quite honest. And back in my life, Freeger's Life Selling Seeds, they were the kings. They were the epicenter of everything. They were the ones that created new flavor profiles, did the hunting. They were the real heroes of our underground industry at the time. So I want to tell these stories again. And one particular one is the very first cultivar that we came out with under the VCC brand was Pomelo Skunk. It was actually called Ciroc, but we tried to get that through the government. They wouldn't let us use Ciroc. And that was bred by a gentleman named Carl from Lansville Genetics here on the island. It's Citrique cross Rockstar. You can't get 2 more iconic British Columbia cultivars than that. And the cross is just this terpenoline equatorial bomb.
Love that terpenoline.
Yeah, you and I are terpenoline junkies.
Yeah, my Mango Gold, the last round of Mango Gold had over 2%. Anyway, I'll let you get back to it.
Oh, that's eye-watering. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I wanted to tell that story. So every time we have folks come in, they're like, oh, I love the Pomelo Skunk. We get to tell that story about, well, it was bred an hour and 40 minutes.
Amazing.
We have another one called After 8th.
After 8th?
After 8th, yeah.
Love that.
That was bred by Ryan Lee from Kyp Genetics, and he's a Canadian. And it was the original S1 cookies he grabbed down in San California, and he crossed it with Legends OG. And we hunted it from seed, and we found this little dominant cultivar, which is very rare, and it's sweet and floral. And I mean, I love telling those stories too, because that's a flavor profile that you don't really find too much outside of medical. The medical users love the linalool.
This is the kind of weed and stories you can expect at the Farmgate store, where the passion for BC cannabis is palpable.
We get to tell stories directly from us to them. There's no middleman. It's just more of a connection to the grower itself. It's truly Farmgate. It's like going to farmers markets. You're meeting the farmer, you're buying the onions and the apples from the farmers, and you're having these conversations. I think it's extremely important because as a small cannabis producer, that's what we have is our story. What makes us different from the big pubcos is the care and all of the small parts that we do.
The passion.
The passion, absolutely. And
you can't survive without it.
We want to show that, yes, our stuff might be a little bit pricier, but here's the reason why. These are the differences. And to have these conversations, then you can choose to support us or not. And we're finding that we're changing hearts and minds for sure.
You can literally taste the difference, right?
Amen.
100%.
Amen.
So you're going straight to the source. You're talking just kind of like old school days a little bit where you've got a grower very nearby, and that's what people like, I think, is not having like a commercial corporate weed, too many pointy shoes in the room, that type of thing.
Pointy shoes. Amen, brother.
Aside from fewer Karens and pointy shoes, what does Kyp think the cannabis tourism industry in Canada needs to thrive?
Be progressive. Let British Columbia producers have a store off-site and let them have just as much of a chance as mega retail with 7 sites across the province. That's progressive to me. That's one thing I want to kind of leave the listeners with, is something like that.
It should mirror the other industries that are similar, like the wine industry, for example, is a perfect example of farmgate and off-site stores and bringing people into, the organic part of the business and seeing like what goes on behind the scenes. So I think there's a lot of room to move like in the right direction, but also there's got to be numbers to support it, and we're getting those numbers. So I think it's time.
Yeah, slowly but surely, man. Yeah. Booze is going down and cannabis consumption is going up.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And Ross, please, if anytime you're on the island, man, just hit me up. We'd love to show you around.
At our next stop on the Potcast Cannabis Tour, we're chatting with someone who can show you some of the best views on Vancouver Island after stopping to pick up some of that delicious BC weed, of course.
My name is Graham Meckling. I live here in Vancouver Island. I own several businesses, and all those businesses, I have one goal, which is to positively impact lives of other people. I wrote a book for new and expecting dads, award-winning restaurateur. I have to-do list cards for people with ADHD, and I prefer a puff over a pint, which is why I started Victoria Cannabis Tours.
Beauty. I prefer a puff over a pint myself.
Yo, that, buddy. It's funny for me because I grew up in the restaurant business, right? Where for like 25 years, like that's all you did was see alcohol everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's something really beautiful about a glass of Chardonnay on a patio on a Friday in the sunshine, right? But no one would disagree with that. But I've also seen all the opposite sides of alcohol, right? So as we see alcohol just taking a nosedive in usage and people just enjoying cannabis more because it's just a lot safer, a lot more relaxing. It's nice to be in a different style of business, to put it that way.
When cannabis was legalized in Canada, Graham saw an opportunity to use his hospitality experience in a different way.
I used to own a couple of restaurants here in Victoria, and when they legalized cannabis, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. And I also thought, man, it's gonna be a big boon for the restaurant business, right? Like there's gonna be groups of 10 people standing outside, trying the latest strain, coming in for preset menus. And then of course it got legalized and absolutely nothing happened. So a couple of years went by and I was talking to this friend of mine that ran walking tours. Mostly of them were Americans coming off cruise ships. I said, how many of these people are asking you for cannabis? And she's like, every single one of them. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, at the very end of the tours, they all whisper in my ear like they're going to get arrested, right? Like, where do I buy the cannabis? And so I was like, oh my gosh. And then I said to her, like, what are these people paying for a tour? And they're like $150 US to like go for a 2-hour walking tour and have like 2 pints of beer. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I just said, well, that's it. And so I talked to the city and said, hey, this is what I want to do. They said, awesome, that sounds great. And then I talked to Tourism Victoria and they said, okay, sounds okay, but we need to see what you're up to. And I said, no sweat. And then I just launched it just out of my van. I've got a passenger transportation license and all the things you need to drive people around safely in my Jeep Grand Cherokee, and started taking people for drives in the summer. Just put a website up and said, hey, come do some sightseeing tours and get stoned.
So awesome.
Yeah, because I was like, man, that's what I would love to do, right? If I was going to Portland or
100%.
Penticton or anywhere, right? I'd be like, if someone's going to pick me up in a nice Jeep, take me directly to a dispensary where I can buy some weed and then take me to a cool spot to smoke it and then show me all these cool places around town. Like that's like my dream scenario.
Speaking of that dream scenario, how is Graham turning it into reality for cannabis tourists in Victoria?
We're gonna have 2 types of tours this year. So we're gonna do like a walking tour, and that works very simply. Right in front of the Empress Hotel, right in the Inner Harbor, we pick you up and we walk you directly to a dispensary where you get to ask your questions, because all the bud tenders are ridiculously amazing. Their knowledge is crazy. Ask the questions you want, get the right information, know what you're gonna take, know the rules and regulations, know how much you can carry with you. Remember to not take any back across the border or back onto your cruise ship. And then you get to enjoy it and take it. We go to a place where you can smoke a joint or eat your edible. And then we just give you like a walking tour of Victoria, just like you'd love to do in any other city, right? But you get to just be lovely and enjoy it and be stoned while you do it. And then there's the private driving tours. So we pick you up from your hotel, wherever you're at in the Grand Cherokee. It's all like leather and plush and cozy, the seat warmers if you need them. And then you get a little gift bag that's got your bubbly water, your Rogers chocolates, get a little beer cozies, and a little bit of merch. Everyone gets a lei around your neck so that if you feel like you just don't want to chat, you just want to have quiet time, you just take it off. That's everyone's signal to know that you're just having some quiet time. And we just drive to the places that you don't normally get a chance to go to on a regular tour. So we're the only company that takes it at Gonzales Beach. That's my favorite beach.
To the spot.
Yeah, it's like the most beautiful beach in the world. Don't tell anybody about it. Right on the ocean, right? So we go there, it's beautiful. We drive up the coast, go past Willow's Beach. I go go up to the top of Mount Tolmie, and then we cruise back downtown. It's awesome.
Part of creating an enjoyable cannabis experience for tourists also involves putting their minds at ease about the legalities of partaking in Canada.
Because if you come from England, Australia, half the states still, right, where you go to prison if you're getting caught with weed, right, it's very hard to make a little jump and trust a word like Amsterdam and you can just smoke a joint, right? So I saw super high affluent like Americans like walk into a beautiful dispensary, come out like they bought a brick of cocaine and like try as fast as they can to get the lid off right by the garbage can, like looking around, you know, and it's Victoria where it's like people smoking joints all over. And you're like, hey guys, it's okay. So people are coming here wanting to try BC weed or Canadian weed or wanted to do it because it's legal.
Legal weed.
Yeah, but they just don't know what to do next. They've got it on them, but now what? That's where the hard part is, the jump of trust from, I'm not going to go to jail too. I can go in this guy's van and trust that he's going to just not drive me somewhere crazy, you know?
That's awesome. I remember when legalization came and the whole like mystique and the hiding it and sneaking around was kind of over. And I found myself not getting as high anymore.
Yeah,
like
sure.
I was still using cannabis as much, but I just didn't feel like so cooked knowing that, you know, I could be arrested. And that was a novelty, actually. And I think tourists from south of the border and other places in the world would probably like to experience that anti-anxiety part of, you know, legal weed.
Man, that's what I tried to push the most. I try to give people the experience that I would want. And I come from customer service background. And I talk about Victoria Cannabis Tours as basically like a customer service company because there is nobody on earth that loves great customer service more than someone who's stoned. Like there's nobody, right? Like if you're stoned and then like 2 minutes later, I'm like, hey, do you want to try we have some Rogers chocolates in your gift bag. And they're like, what? Rogers choc for me?
Oh, perfect.
You know, like, oh, that's all I wanted. Thank you. You're like, no sweat. And by the way, there's a little bubbly water. You can rinse it down. It's like carbonated, so it kind of cleanses your palate. Oh, thank you so much, right? So I think it's just giving people the chance to get stoned, like you're saying, Rob and Ross, and then just do something, right? Just enjoy the experience without the stress and the anxiety that comes with it when you're going to go to prison in England. It's a big difference, you know?
100%.
Big difference.
I remember being in prison in Japan, and that was no fun.
Yeah, you win that one, buddy.
Yeah. That was one day, and the next day was a different day. I'll tell you that. But yeah, here we are now, 25 years later.
And what does Graham envision for the future of cannabis tourism?
I want to see people do this. I think cannabis tourism should be customer service tourism. I think whatever you're doing, if you're running a knitting circle, if you are running like a bike trail thing, like whatever you are passionate about that you do, I think that you can just add cannabis to it. What makes a cannabis experience great is not just what you're doing, but like the services that you're providing, right? Give them something to drink because they're going to be thirsty. Give them something to eat because they're going to want to nibble on something, and just be patient. That's it. You do those three things, anything that you want to do cannabis tourism related will be awesome.
One of the ideas that I have for cannabis tourism is something I've been thinking about for decades is cannabis ski tours. For example, whatever ski resort you want to pick, I'll take them on a tour of the mountain. It would be great to have like a little dispensary or some kind of like dedicated little hut at the top of the mountain that you could go to and check out the local cannabis and go for a tour of the mountain. Go have a puff in the trees like in the olden days.
Yeah, well, we've all done that. Yeah.
You know, sign me up.
I think that's it, Ross. I think if that's your thing, right? Of course, who wouldn't want to go hang out with a professional Olympic gold medal, awesome dude who's like, you know, like I would be like, yeah, sign me up, charge me whatever you want, right? Because I think it's just give people a great experience.
And there's like bars and everything at the top of the mountain too, right? Like, you know, people are up there drinking and then they ski down. So the precedent's there.
I think if you can build a great positive cannabis experience, then that will be an award-winning experience. If you told me I could go with you, Ross, and in that hut, there's going to be like yummy hot chocolate and like a one-on-one with you, that would be the best. And I would happily do it. My wife is a ski bunny. She would love nothing more. She would be so jacked.
I live in the Okanagan now, and wine tours are a big deal. And obviously, they're mostly all farmgate around here on the Naramata Bench. And it would just be great to have those sorts of venues available for cannabis, where you have windows so people aren't going into the rooms. They're like, there's shutters that go up when the lights turn on and people can walk through a hallway that's on the exterior of the building that they can see in, see the people working on the plants, see the plants, and then go to a patio, like you say, and order a pizza and maybe some local cannabis and enjoy the view.
It feels weird that we have to talk like this. Don't you think, Ross? Like, it's kind of weird that we have to be like, no, it'd just be nice to be able to just smoke a J and eat a pizza.
Right? Yeah. After all these years of legalization, we're still not there yet. But I think, guys like you are pushing the envelope. So
we're just talking about smoking a J as an adult, as a over 19-year-old person who just wants to like go and do whatever you want to do with cannabis. Do you want to go and have a quiet time on the bus? No sweat. You want to go have a puff and have a giggle? Great. You want to go put your feet in the ocean? I had 2 ladies who went for a swim in the ocean. Okay, like I carry towels in the car because we wash your feet off from the stand and stuff. Like, do you mind if we take a dip? I'm like, I don't care. That sounds awesome. If you want to do those things, it's just a matter of a couple of phone calls to your local city, to your local counselor, and just say, hey, like, this is what I want to do. It's 100% on the up and up. I want to do it in conjunction with you guys. Let's talk about what the best practices are. Let's talk about what your concerns are. Like, what are you concerned about from the city? If anyone out there wants to just ask me a question about like the phone calls that you can make, I'm happy to answer. Because the more of us that do it, the better for everybody. Like, a culture is not one person, a culture is a bunch of us. So
I just have to ask this question because it inevitably will happen where somebody greens out
yeah,
or has too much. And then all of a sudden they're like hanging onto the railing going, oh my God, I'm so cooked right now. I don't know if I could carry on. Do you have any plans for that sort of?
Yeah. One of the reasons why we have delays is so you could take that off and no one talks to you if you just smoked a little bit too much, right? But also the tours, we have a slogan of a moderate consumption equals maximum experience, right? We don't spend an hour smoking pot, right? And then going back on the tour, because that's not fun for anybody. I think, if you have like a couple of tokes and then you jump back into the tour, that's what you want. You want that first little peak of high, right? And I warn everybody and I tell them, hey, just to let you know, this is like an hour and 45-minute tour. And on the way back, you're going to be getting a little tired, right? You had a little puff. So it's okay if it gets quiet in here. Don't worry about it. That's part of the tour. That's when you can take some deep breaths, roll the windows down. I play like chill beats.
That's a great thing to let them know. Like, don't feel obligated to have to carry a conversation or, because cannabis sometimes gives you time to be introspective or.
Yeah. And that's why a big part of what we do is a big onboard speech. Knowledge is power no matter what circumstance. And if you just tell people, look, this is how it's going to work. Everyone's safe from here on in. This is government approved, city approved. There's nothing here that's shady or scary whatsoever. All of it's on the up and up. All we're going to do is go buy some cannabis, which is 100% legal. We're going to go to a spot to smoke it or eat it, which is 100% legal. We're going to go on a tour and then we're going to come back. And if at any time anyone needs anything, they can just come talk to me. I got your back, when we're all in it together. So let's just have some fun.
Thanks to Kyp Rowe from Victoria Cannabis Company and Graham Meckling from Victoria Cannabis Tours for joining us today and for doing their part to show the world how beautiful BC is, not just for its bud, but also its people. And of course, the spectacular views. If you've got Vancouver Island on your next vacation itinerary, be sure to look them up for a good time. Join us for the next episode of the Potcast, where we'll be examining the fascinating world of terpenes, the entourage effect, and why the conversation about cannabis should cover a lot more than just THC. Subscribe to the Potcast with Ross Rebliati so you don't miss a beat. Another Everything Podcast production. Visit everythingpodcast.com, a division of Pattison Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast.